Since its release almost 16 years ago, Rez has not only stood the test of time, but perhaps has improved with age. Through a combination of perfectly timed sound and rich visual design, Rez delivers an emotional experience that's difficult to forget. And now, it's available on the PC. You could say that with this latest release, Rez has finally reached its final form. Rez Infinite checks most of the boxes you could want in a PC conversion. Arbitrary resolution support is in. Resolution scaling is available up to 250%. Multi-sampling anti-aliasing is included for Rez Classic. And it all runs like a dream. On top of that, the game supports the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive for that extra immersion. At its core then, Rez Infinite is comprised of two unique pieces. The original Rez with its enhanced visuals, and Area X, a brand new stage built using Unreal Engine 4. Area X isn't especially lengthy, mind you, but it's oh so powerful and offers a tasty morsel of what a proper sequel to Rez might look like. While both options are available right from the beginning on PC, we opted to begin with classic Rez on our mid-range PC equipped with a GTX 970 and an i5 3570K. Connected to a 4K display, Rez plays well at a native 4K with MSAA disabled, and it looks quite good. Performance is stable and the game shows no signs of struggling. So we pushed it further by enabling 2x MSAA. This type of anti-aliasing was first introduced in Rez HD on the Xbox 360, but the resolution was limited to just 720p. At 4K, the addition of MSAA might seem like overkill, but with a focus on razor-sharp lines and simplistic shapes, it helps eliminate jagged edges nicely. The 970 is able to handle the game well at these settings, but it's not 100% perfect. There are occasional dips here and there with MSAA enabled that reduce the fluidity of the experience, but still, overall it's mostly stable. Just for testing then, we jumped up to 4x MSAA, and the results are worse. You can get away with 2x MSAA, but at 4x it's just too much at native 4K and the frame rate really starts to drop. One issue with the PC conversion that we have to mention involves support for proper full screen. Essentially, the game seems to be locked into a double buffer VSync configuration. No amount of disabling VSync outside of the game or within the game would remove the cap. And without a high refresh rate monitor handy, I wasn't able to test support for higher refresh rates, but from what I can tell, it feels like the game is limited to the desktop refresh rate during normal gameplay. Even when using the so-called full screen mode, things like desktop notifications would continue to pop up during gameplay, which is a little annoying. And just for comparison, here's how the PS4 Pro version stacks up against the PC. It's one of the few games to support native 4K rendering at 60 frames per second. And if you look at the edges here, it stacks up very well against the PC version with 4x MSAA. An impressive accomplishment indeed. But what if you load up Rez on a more powerful system? Well, for round 2 we pulled out the i7 5820K and paired it with an NVIDIA GTX Titan XP. Complete overkill for a game like this. Then through a combination of NVIDIA DSR and the in-game resolution scaler, we pushed Rez up to an effective 14188 by 7482 resolution with 2x MSAA. And that's just where the capture gear maxed out. On its own, we're actually able to reach a full 16K resolution at 60 frames per second with 2x MSAA enabled on a Titan XP. With NVIDIA DSR smoothing dropped to 0, you get results that are unbelievably crisp. Of course, if we try to take the resolution scaler any higher at this point, it puts up an error, but still, this is mighty impressive. Playing Rez at 16K is sublime. Sure, if you look closely, you'll spot a few low-resolution elements in the presentation, including certain HUD and text bits, but overall, the presentation is pristine. Every line is displayed with absolute precision to the point where it almost resembles a proper vector monitor. Despite its age, Rez holds up remarkably well and scales perfectly to these super high resolutions. And despite this high resolution, everything hums along at a silky smooth 60 frames per second. This section was captured at that obscenely high resolution and manages to hold its target nicely. If you find yourself with an 8K monitor or something greater than that somehow, Rez just might be the perfect choice to break it in. It should come as no surprise that a graphics card this powerful could power through Rez at obscene resolutions, but still, This isn't exactly something you see every day. Okay, so how about something from AMD? Now, I don't have the latest Radeon cards available here for testing, but I did try Rez on an R9 290X. Thanks to its 512-bit memory bus, this card avoids the issues that plagued the GTX 970. That means you can enjoy Rez Infinite at a full 4K resolution while still using 4x multi-sampling anti-aliasing. The performance is virtually perfect in this mode. The 970 is only able to match the 290X in performance when running without MSAA, so this is a nice advantage in favor of Team Red. An impressive showing on the AMD side then, and one that suggests that owners of newer Radeon cards shouldn't run into driver issues with this game at launch. So at this point then, both the mid-range and high-end cards can handle Rez quite nicely. But we also sampled the game briefly on a laptop equipped with a GeForce GTX 965M, and amazingly enough, it manages to work quite well at 1080p 60. We did run into an occasional crash on the laptop unfortunately, but the performance is there. The point is, overhead is low on this game and you can expect good results even on lower end PCs today. And any mid-range card should have no troubles reaching native 4K. So if we go beyond resolution, what else does the options menu hold for PC gamers? Well, you can adjust the texture resolution, which produces these three results. The highest setting features textures with a resolution 8 times that of the original game, which in turn are even sharper than the PS4 version. As mentioned earlier, MSAA is available and the change is immediately evident on the menu if you look at the lines below every option, so you definitely know it's working. Texture filtering is also adjustable, though with the rather low requirements here it should be possible to leave this cranked up. And really that's about it for Rez Classic. Now if we jump over to Area X, then we get a glimpse of what Unreal Engine 4 can bring to the table with Rez. That means a presentation focused entirely on particle effects. Swirling particles dance across the pitch black canvas in time to the music, while players are finally offered a chance to break free from the on-rails confines of the original game. It's a freeing experience that is quite a sight to behold. It also features greatly increased system requirements. While the Titan XP is still able to power through at 4K, pushing beyond this can introduce performance issues in certain instances. Area X also lacks MSAA support, instead offering different strengths of FXAA, though to be fair, MSAA wouldn't make a huge difference here given the focus on particle effects rather than solid lines. And those particles are key here. Area X appears to make use of vector fields to give the illusion of smoothly flowing particle clouds. Vector fields can be influenced by forces defined by the designer, enabling some beautiful swirling effects as we see here. As you'd expect then, the more demanding Area X pushes the 970 pretty hard, and this can exhibit slowdown in the 4K mode. The solution of course is to use the resolution scale option to dial things back just a touch, which does improve performance quickly. The old R9 290X then fares better once again. We do see some small drops here in Area X when running at 4K, but the performance is more stable overall than the GTX 970. For this level of card then, it seems that AMD does have an advantage here. Based on our experiences across low, mid-range, and high-end PCs then, it feels like both aspects of Rez Infinite are very well optimized. Given its roots, it's not surprising, but it's nice to see that this game was delivered without issue. You will need a little more grunt for Area X, but even laptops can handle the original Rez. It is interesting to consider just how far we've come then. When looking at Rez Infinite through the lens of time, it's fun to reflect back on how the game has evolved, while still retaining its unique look. It's likely that the first version conceived was the Dreamcast release, which hit the same day as the PlayStation 2 version in Japan back in late 2001. On the Dreamcast, the game runs at 30 frames per second, but supports 480p output and looks pretty good as a result. The PlayStation 2 version though retains the same presentation as the Dreamcast version, but switches to an interlaced mode while doubling the frame rate to 60 frames per second instead. For the next 6 years, this is how gamers would experience Rez. In 2008, Hexadrive helped develop a port of the game for Xbox 360. It runs at 720p with high resolution textures, MSAA, and improved audio. It was the definitive version of Rez for years, save for a few sound pitch bugs compared to the original game, which have been corrected in Infinite by the way. That all changed in 2016 then when Rez Infinite was announced and subsequently released for the PlayStation 4. The PS4 version serves as the basis for the PC version we've been looking at today, and it offers the full res experience with enhanced visuals on the PS4 Pro. Infinite also includes support for PSVR, which is a great addition to the game, while introducing Area X, which has to be unlocked on the PS4 unlike the PC version. And just to get a better understanding of how the new version stacks up against the originals, here's a look at the PC version running side by side with the PlayStation 2 version. As you'd expect, the jump from a low-res interlace signal up to the super ultra-high resolution available on the PC, it's pretty impressive. That said, there are some subtle graphical differences here that we observe, like the green tint here in the background on PlayStation 2. That's sort of changed with the Infinite version of res. Overall though, it's clear that this new version is a massive step up in every way, and this applies to both the PS4 and PC versions. So how about VR then? Anyone that has played Res Infinite using the PSVR knows how immersive it can be, and the PC version is no exception. The higher resolution headsets available on the PC allow for enhanced image quality and extra downsampling, resulting in a cleaner overall experience. Area X is the highlight here though. Running at a native 90Hz, this mode feels incredible and offers improved visuals and fluidity over the PSVR original. The empty space and focus on particles also help avoid any motion sickness you might otherwise encounter. This is as good a Res VR experience as you could ever hope for. The Oculus Touch also works better than the PS Move controllers with greatly improved accuracy. The same goes for the Vive ones, of course. Unfortunately, classic Res doesn't fare quite as well. The issue here is that the game appears to be designed around 60 frames per second. We already had issues trying to uncap the frame rate, but in VR it seems that 60Hz is simply forced to run at the headset's native 90Hz. The result is a visible double image effect similar to 30 FPS games on a 60Hz display, but of course it's faster than that. The motion simply doesn't feel as smooth as it should as a result. It's still enjoyable to play, but the game's legacy code seems to present a problem here when running at high frame rates. Beyond this issue, I also found that classic Res was more likely to induce motion sickness, but of course this will vary from person to person. Still, even with these issues, if you have a VR headset, it is an absolutely amazing way to experience the game. And experience it you should. While Res has existed for almost 16 years now, this is the first time the game has been officially available on the PC, and it's mostly a great port. While the lack of proper full screen and an uncapped frame rate are certainly disappointing, part of these issues really can be traced back to its age and reliance on timing. The music appears to be tied to the frame rate, for instance, and dropping below 60 FPS results in distortion. With that in mind though, the low requirements and ability to run at super high resolutions cannot be ignored, and Res Infinite is great to have on the PC at last, especially if you have access to a VR headset. But that's all we have for today. If you enjoyed this look at Res, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter as always. And until next time, I'm off to play some more Res.